So BTD6 introduced a new boss balloon called the Dreadbloon. I'm not the most experienced player, but I have beaten Elite Bloonarius before, and I think Elite Lich, but I haven't played the other boss balloon, the Vortex. So it's been a bit since I've played. And I decided today, let's just try to beat the Dreadbloon and see what its gimmick is. Now, I've already seen a couple videos kind of saying what this thing does from more experienced players, and it seems like it's pretty interesting. The big gimmick with this boss balloon is that it negates certain damage types. For instance, it'll start by saying, hey, I'm not going to take any primary damage, so you have to build other types of monkeys such as magic support or military. And then for each skull that you get to, it'll change the resistance, so maybe primary and then magic, so on so on. I don't remember the specific order because I wasn't actually paying enough attention, but you get the gist of it. This incentivizes you to use multiple types of towers, which I think is really cool. And now that there's a bunch of Paragon towers out there, it also incentivizes you to actually play the game more and get multiple types of Paragons. That way, if you're struggling with one kind of damage type, you can build a Paragon for it. Now, as usual with these boss balloons, you're going to want to farm a lot. And I mean a lot. You're going to need copious amounts of cash if you want to be able to successfully make it through these things in a pretty easy way. Or not easy, but to be able to make it through A-okay, if you get what I mean. Now, because this is the first appearance of the Dreadbloon, it's a brand new boss balloon, they give it on a very easy map to start. This by no means is a difficult map to fight this boss on. It's a track that bends in on itself a lot, so something like Tack Shooter absolutely obliterates it. And there's plenty of track space along with space to be able to build your towers and deal with the balloons as they come. But the other thing to look out for when it comes to Dreadbloon is it sends out these rock balloons. I don't entirely understand how these balloons work, but apparently they kind of function like mini Moabs. And I say that because if you get something like a Moab limb, it does deal the extra damage. Any tower that says deals more damage to a Moab, apparently it does more damage to these rock balloons, or so I've heard. And honestly, they can be pretty difficult to take down, especially with how the Dreadbloon will just negate certain damage type. I actually found myself losing a lot of lives because I'd have my Tack Shooter, which could reliably deal with everything, get blocked out by the Dreadbloon and not be able to get enough Pierce to even get to the rock balloons. But the rock balloons are also very tanky. If you don't have a really high DPS tower, these balloons are just gonna fly right by, and I'm not sure if you can inflict them with, like, freeze or with glue. I think you might be able to do a Moab glue on it, but don't quote me on that one. Now, along with every other type of boss balloon, the recommended towers are going to be something like an Operation Dartstorm or a Tack Zone. You know, things that just shoot copious amounts of stuff that could be alchemized to just do insane amounts of damage very quickly. But because they also shoot so much, such as a Tack Zone, whenever the boss balloon gets over it, it's going to just be doing an insane amount of damage because every single dart is going to hit. That means your early waves, if you just get an overdrive Tack Shooter, then you should be pretty fine as long as it's not resisting primary towers. And when it is resisting a primary tower, go for a Sticky Bomb early on, and that does pretty well. In my first attempt, I actually just went with a Dragon Breath Wizard, and I was able to hold its ground pretty well. But of course, the early waves are usually the easiest ones to deal with a boss balloon. It's all about those late game waves. And as such, you do want to try to use your early game to get your farming started as quick as you can. Because once you start reaching around tier 3, that's when your boss balloon gets out of hand. So if you can use your early waves to get a bunch of cash, it'll snowball in the future for you. This is also how you can get your Paragons late game, is by getting a copious amount of cash early to be able to get a lot of farms as you keep going. Now, this is not the elite version, which means Paragons, you're not really necessary. You can kind of do a lot of different strategies, and you should be just fine, especially because this is an easier map. But generally speaking, you do want to get your farms going, and if this was a more difficult map, you're going to want to get started early and build some powerful towers. And when I say powerful towers, I mean stuff that can stand on its own against normal waves. You know, stuff like hero towers, tier 3 or 4 wizards, a really solid primary tower like a Morglave's Boomerang. Maybe you'll even go for like a sharpshooter monkey. Especially with earlier maps, you can usually just place your hero and then get a really cheap primary tower, get it to maybe tier 3 or 4, and as long as you have every type of balloon popping, then you should be able to make it through pretty far. And with that, you can just start farming on the side while your 2 towers, just get business done with the regular waves. And then when the boss balloon shows up, go ahead and build your tier 4 and 5s to be able to deal with it. And then when it's over, you can just sell off your strong towers you made, get some cash back, and go right back to farming. Are you struggling? Want a little bit of a tip on how to get your towers to work a bit better? If you're building something like a tack zone or an overdrive, you can also throw a village onto it and get up to around primary training, and it should be able to deal with a lot of stuff on its own. Or another option is take an alchemist and take the top path with it, and then make sure it's only targeting your overdrive or tack zone. That way that's the only thing getting the buffs. This should be able to handle a lot of the early game boss tiers. But with the Dreadbloon, you're going to need at least 2 types of towers, that way when one gets negated, the other one can carry the damage anyway. For the early Dreadbloon waves, I would say get a sticky bomb and an overdrive / tack zone. The sticky bomb will always do a crazy amount of damage for how early it is, and the overdrive will do the same but also be really good at taking down a lot of the extra balloons. But like I said earlier, there's also those rock balloons, and you're going to need to be able to deal with those effectively as well. I actually found getting a dart monkey up to Juggernaut or Ultra Juggernaut early was actually pretty useful. It was really good at taking down all the ceramics, getting leads, and it seems like it might do more damage to those rock balloons as well, but I could be wrong. A big benefit to the Juggernaut or Ultra Juggernaut is how high its pierce cap is. The Dreadbloon is going to eat up pierce caps, so as much damage as your overdrive or tack zone is going to be doing, it's only really going to be doing damage to the Dreadbloon and nothing else. So if you have something like a Juggernaut or Ultra Juggernaut with a really high pierce cap just going straight through it and doing lots of damage, you should still be pretty okay with all the extra balloons showing up. Now as you get into the later waves, Dreadbloon is going to get a lot tankier. So we're going to start looking at tier 5s instead of tier 4s. Of course, the tack zone will still be pretty strong for when primary damage isn't negated, but now let's start looking at some other interesting towers. In the very late game, getting an MAD, or MAD for short, will be very powerful. This is a tier 5 middle path Dartling gun upgrade, and that absolutely shreds bosses and Moab type balloons. But it's really expensive, which is why I say late game. In the mid game, an Operation Dartstorm, which is the top path planes, is actually pretty good. It's kind of like a flying tack zone almost. Now, I didn't use any support towers for damage, so take what I say with a grain of salt, but here's one that might work. Going for a Sentry Champion might be pretty good, which is the top path Engineer Monkey, because it'll get a lot of projectiles out there. And a middle path Spike Factory should work pretty well, because you get a lot of spikes out there, especially when you use its active ability when the Dreadbloon is right on it. Now for magic towers, you do have the Grand Bomber and the Sticky Bombs, but those are a lot better on the earlier waves. But as you get to the later waves, an Avatar of Wrath is incredible. It shoots a whole lot of projectiles really quickly. To really maximize its damage, get 5 Poplush Druids around it, and you're solid. But of course, when you start getting these higher waves, make sure you have your Alchemist buffs, maybe even your village buffs like Jungle Drums, Primary Training, and one that I didn't use in my footage is an Overclock. But I'm always kind of scared to use it because I forget to use my active abilities sometimes, and it's very expensive. But that's a very powerful tower as well. And then for the late game is when you want to look into Paragons. In general, any Paragon should work just fine, and on Elite you're probably going to need multiple Paragons anyway. Paragons are very expensive, which is why you should farm early and throughout your entire time. But on top of that, if you're not a very experienced player, well, you're probably not going to have Paragons because they require a very large amount of time played in the game. For instance, I only have the Dart Monkey Paragon and the Boomerang Paragon, I believe. Now they've got the plane, and they've got the ninja, and they've got the boat, and I just don't play enough to get that kind of experience. I mean, I don't even have every tower maxed out still. So when it comes to a lower level account, your experience is going to be drastically different to a higher level account, especially with monkey knowledge, don't forget about that. But with that, that's been my Dreadbloon experience and some tips on how maybe you can do better at it. So, if I helped at all or you found it interesting, leave a like, subscribe, comment, do all the fun stuff like that. And this is also day 14 of my daily uploads up until Christmas. We've got 11 days remaining. And as such, I have a collage playing in the background where I draw something to commemorate every single day that I've done something. And that's about it. See you guys.